Please join me in welcoming Bill Downs and Steve Kushner. Bill and Steve, take it away.
Thank you, Rachel. This is Bill, and I am privileged to be joined by my partner, my colleague, Steve Kushner. He's a friend, a colleague, confidant, and an extraordinarily intelligent scientist, researcher. So one of the things that I want to talk about tonight is the science. And the issue is, where does science come from? First, it starts with a hypothesis, a thought, a desire to know something. And for those of you that do know me, and some of the things that frustrate those who know me is I have the mental perspective of a 2-year-old. I'm always asking why. Why is this so? Why does this have to happen? And that is the mind of the eternal investigator who has to dig down until he or she discovers the answer. And it's almost a never-ending process. But one of the, when we talk about science, the word science over the last 3 years has been thrown around like confetti at a Thanksgiving Day parade. And it is so misunderstood. The real essence of science is in scientific method. It's in repeatability. And it's in our case as well, publishability. There's a lot of companies out there that claim they have science, but if you go into PubMed or Google Scholar, you don't find anything that's published that went through a rigorous, fanatical peer review or review by a board of scientists on that journal or that textbook that achieved approval by them unanimously. It has to have unanimous approval in order to get published. And one of the things that Steve and I and Dr. Bakshi and Dr. Blum can lay claim to is that, and we've used this term, and I think it's kind of numbing, is the term a disruptive technological breakthrough. We've broken new ground. Some of the products that we've brought to market are based on a platform of solid science, but on a platform of disruptive technological breakthroughs. For example, our Protovite was shown, and it's an iron-free supplement, was shown to restore iron-dependent hemoglobin in minutes. That rattles the cage of any scientist, health practitioner who's been out there for years and years and years dealing with conventional dogma that says if you want to restore iron to the red blood cell, you have to take iron. That if you don't have iron, you have anemia. Well, we don't diagnose, treat, cure, prevent any disease. In fact, for the most part, we don't even know why certain diseases are happening other than they're probably genetic predispositions, poor lifestyle choices, and other conditions, stresses and things like that that play into it. But Steve and I found that when you take Protovite, we found that deficiency of iron is not caused by an iron deficiency. It's caused by a deficiency of alkalinizing buffers, which Protovite provides. There's no iron in it, so that it could restore iron is pretty miraculous. Our Enzorb, we found, helps to restore a restful night's sleep in addition to improving immune function and metabolic activity. But our pièce de résistance, our crowning achievement with metabolic activation, is encapsulated, figuratively speaking, in Trimrox. We will be applying for a patent on this product because we have found that Trimrox works 100% of the time. But tonight, we want to discuss the issue of plateaus. That some people, and just for a moment, let me take it to the extreme and say that somebody gets on Trimrox and they lose, let's say, 6 inches in 60 days, total, body 6 inches, inch and a half in one arm and another arm, and around the waist, around the chest, around the hips, around the thighs. Maybe it's a total of 6 inches, and then it plateaus. Everybody plateaus. Can you imagine if people did not plateau and they just kept losing? At some point in time, you would hear a bloop, and they'd disappear. It just doesn't happen that way. So I'm going to hand it off now to Steve. And by the way, we don't rehearse these. He had no idea what I was going to say. But I'd like Steve to just chime in with some of his thoughts on this issue. Steve.
Sure, thank you, and thank you for that very nice introduction as well. And the feeling is quite mutual. We have a lot of fun, and I would say probably many people probably know we don't rehearse these by the time they get done listening to us. But that's okay. We do our best. You bring up an interesting point, and I'll go back to what you mentioned about the Protovite first, in that we did not set out to find a formulation that would restore hemoglobin or help the body to restore hemoglobin. That was unexpected, and that's often what happens when you discover something new, is in the course of doing your work, you notice a reaction or an effect that you go, wow, that probably shouldn't have happened, or we're not sure. And then you investigate it more, and you figure out what happened, and now we know to a great degree, and that's even one of our published papers, and that's why we can talk about that. And when Bill talks about these plateaus you hit, if you kept losing weight, you eventually would just disappear out of existence. It's not possible to keep losing weight. You can get to a point where you're greatly reduced weight, very trim, tone, much more lean muscle, better metabolic rate, etc. But you have to keep that up too, even with proper diet, exercise, and hope the right supplementation. And if you think about plateaus, sometimes they're because that's what the body's supposed to do, and sometimes it's because you're going through other things. Because weight loss, and I use that word only for brevity here, we're talking about changing metabolic competence and recontouring the body with us providing, hopefully, the supplements to help that. But sometimes it can't work because you're facing stress, a disease, an injury, poor diet. Any number of things that causes stress will require your body to redirect its energy efforts to other things, healing, getting over a cold, etc. And it's not likely that your body's going to worry about losing weight or gaining lean tissue, etc. at that time. The problem is we've all been conditioned to think, when I start a diet, I better keep losing every week and look better every week, or something's wrong, and we give it up. And those plateaus are the body's way of saying, slow down or redirect. So please don't assume that whatever you're doing, even if it's just a really good diet and exercise, that just because things slow down, you get frustrated, go, that's it, I give up. I'm going back to eating ice cream and French fries every night, because you're doing yourself a disservice. And to that end, one of the things that we've learned, and as Bill said, we don't rehearse this, but it kind of made me think about this to a great degree. As I mentioned before about how we discovered about reinvigorating the body's hematology with hemoglobin and Protovite and buffering, because of some conversations we had with a small percentage of people that weren't quite getting the results that most people were getting with the TrimRox, we had talked about perhaps using it at night. And it's completely counterintuitive, because anytime you think about a supplement that's going to enhance your metabolism, you go, I'm not taking that before bed. I want to sleep. But we had some people that said, yeah, let's try that, and it made sense. The rationale behind it made sense. And it worked. It not only had helped, as far as we know, in the majority of the cases, improved the results on the metabolic efficiency, but people were sleeping just fine, sometimes better. And this started us talking about, well, when we hit a plateau, it's the body's way of saying, do something different, because you need a change right now. There's a different thing going on in terms of healing. And what Bill is talking about, which is this kind of this new paradigm that we feel we've come to, is the body needs energy for everything. So I'll make that clear. And Bill knows a lot more about this than I. But basically, ATP, which is the energy molecule, it's the currency of the body. Same thing as currency for using money to buy things. If you don't have enough currency, you can't afford anything. If you don't have enough energy currency, your body won't function properly. So you need energy not only to get through the day and do labor and all those things and focus on things, but you need it to sleep too, because your body heals itself when you go to sleep. And if you don't have enough energy, that function is going to be disrupted or fail. So it appears as though the energy-enhancing benefits of TrimRox, and again, no stimulants, but just enhancing the body's ability to use energy. And we talked about AMPK and other ingredients that improve fatty acid oxidation, improve oxygenation, etc. It appears as though we are getting improvements in sleep by the use of TrimRox, which again is completely counterintuitive, but we feel we found something really unique here. And we're going to do some more experimentation with this, and we may just be in a position where VNI comes out with a brand new paradigm again about how the body works and how it can be repaired. So I'll stop talking now and turn it back over to you, Bill.
Yeah, well, the point is that, as Steve mentioned, we don't use stimulants. Yes, there is some caffeine, like half a cup of coffee worth of caffeine, but it has no effect on central nervous system stimulation or adrenal stimulation. The company that brought the product out has already done a clinical study that determined it did not cause adrenal stimulation. And in order to get central nervous system stimulation, you're going to see adrenal stimulation. It did not do that. So back to the counterintuitive perspective on this, there is no stimulation happening. There is only metabolic correction. And metabolic correction, as Steve referred to, even sleep is a step, is part of the process of metabolism. And it is very energy intensive. Even though we're sleeping, other stuff is working really hard to clean, to repair, to restore, rejuvenate, regenerate tissues of the body in the process of getting rid of waste and rejuvenating metabolic competence. We've actually begun a randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled study on TrimRox. And one of the things we're going to be looking at, part of the group, and this is not being done in the VNI family this time. This is truly an independent study because we applied for an investigational review board, an IRB, and we've got that approval. The clinicaltrials.gov, we got that approval. And one of the things we're going to be doing is taking a look at the difference between 1 dose a day and 2 doses a day against a placebo. And we're also going to look at people that take it at nighttime, a subpopulation of that group, the people that take it at nighttime to see what benefits that gets. And we're going to record these findings and write up get the statistical results and write up the manuscript and submit it to a journal, and et cetera, et cetera. And there'll be scientific presentations. And somewhere along the way, we're going to be publishing all of the research that we've done that's not clinical trials, but that are commentary, opinion, reviews, and revelations from previous clinical trials. A really important one happens to be that Protovite one that Steve and I talked about. In our original paper, we didn't feature the fact that the iron-free supplement restored iron-dependent hemoglobin. That was done in a subsequent published paper that had to go through peer review where we had case studies that were done as well. So, we don't want you to become nutrition scientists. That's not our purpose on doing these calls. But we want you to understand the credibility and not the hyperbole and chatter that you hear in the media about what science is, but real honest-to-goodness, legitimate science that has peer-reviewed, published, cited research that gets into academic textbooks, which we've done, that gets published in scientific journals. And again, I repeat, the crowning achievement for our formulation endeavors, for Steve and mine formulation endeavors, is TrimRox. And back to this issue of plateaus. Not all plateaus are the same amount of time. Some people can plateau for a week or 2 weeks, a month, and some people could plateau for 6 months to a year as the body does one thing, and that is to recalibrate. Just like when you come down the steps, you got to take it one step at a time, and mentally, subconsciously, you're readjusting your perspective with each step until you get to the bottom and you're where you're supposed to be. Well, the body doesn't have that vision of where the bottom is, and it has to recalibrate in stages and phases along the way. And as Steve mentioned, life stresses, chemical exposure, environmental toxins, bad food choices, bad relationships, or not even struggling, but challenging relationships and financial issues and work-related issues, road rage, whatever it is, cause the body to go into a state of, fight or flight, to shut down, and your body is going to preserve resources. It's not going to spend energy. You're not going to burn fuel. You're going to store it up in case, whether you're running from a saber-toothed tiger, which we don't do anymore, or you're dealing with life stresses, the body's response is the same. And when your body's in a state of survival panic, you're not going to be getting rid of extra body fat and, recomposizing your body's structure. It's just not going to happen. And to some extent, it might even stack some more fat, sugar, and water in storage depots temporarily. But we know, and we have the evidence to demonstrate it, and we're doing a randomized double-blind placebo-controlled study to confirm it and validate it, that TrimRox works. It's just, how does it work? What is the dose that's required? Do we need to change the time to take it? How long, persistent, like as Rachel has put together this 180-day perspective, which is, even though we saw great results in 21 days, and some people have continued on that process. When Jeff was on the other week or the other month, he talked about the fact that he had plateaued. Some people call it hitting the wall. And it wasn't until he made some dietary changes that he opened, the bottom fell out and he started reducing size and losing some weight again. By the way, Steve and I really don't like the term weight loss because that creates a priority. Yes, it will happen at some point, but it's not exactly consistent with how the body changes composition. Because if you're somebody who's pretty athletic and you need to put on more muscle to increase energy burning potential, that'll weigh 2.5 times more than the fat. And so you may actually see the scale go up and misinterpret that. We don't want you to be derailed by misinformation. We want you to be persistent. Stay with the program. We know it works. If you want it to work a little bit faster, you can take a little bit more, as Steve mentioned, which is, by the way, what I'm doing, is take it before you go to bed at night. And boy, has it improved my sleep. I want to give everybody my personal product experience on some recent developments that I'll discuss after Steve makes some additional comments.
Yeah, real quick then, thank you. I just want to point out again, as you went through all of that, it's important to remember, you brought this up before, we didn't just put out a weight loss supplement that we knew would work. I mean, we knew we could create fat burning and all that kind of stuff, and then we'd have a rebound effect. But, we'd sell some product and people would be happy for a little while, and we'd take that safe path. We're talking about, again, a little bit of a new paradigm here, and we're learning as we go a little bit, too, because this is venturing into new territory. But by the way, that's what really makes interesting articles for peer-reviewed journals is when you come up with something new. I mean, I can go find a brand-new peer-reviewed journal that says they've discovered vitamin D is good for immunity. Okay, great, thank you. But we kind of knew that. But you won't find anything that talks an iron-free supplement that helps reestablish proper hematology and hemoglobin work. And I don't think you'll find a whole lot that we're going to see in the near future with VNI that says we've shown that reestablishing metabolic competence that ultimately is to recorrect excessive fat and not enough lean tissue is actually helping people sleep better. And that is our goal, and I think we'll get there. But that's what's different about VNI for sure. We absolutely are trailblazing. So I'll leave it at that and let you go into your experience, Bill, please.
Okay. So I'm a VNI customer. I take VNI products, and I take quite a bit of them. However, as many of you may not know, and I'll reveal tonight, I had COVID back before, right before Christmas. I got COVID, and I was an extreme athlete most of my life, 45 years. At 55 years old, I still had a six-pack, and I worked out to extreme, and that was my lifestyle. I ate pretty well for the most part, took a lot of supplements, and, some of you that have been around for a lot of years, the Ed and Ginas and the Michael Solettis that have known me for many years knew me when I was that way. But some of you have heard me say that extreme athletes have more health problems than the vast majority of individuals because of the abuse that they put their body through to achieve those performance objectives. And I guess I was a little bit wrung out, and I got COVID, and it hit me really hard. So I had COVID for about 6 or 7 days, and I wasn't doing well, and I had to go to the hospital. And I when I was in the hospital, when they screen you to bring you in, the doctor said, you've got atrial fibrillation. Your heart is all over the place. My heart rate was 168 beats a minute. So some of you may wonder
I'm glad
why.
you laugh about that. That's good.
Yeah, right. Some of the people may wonder why they haven't heard from me for a while. Well, I dropped out of sight for a little bit because I was in pretty bad shape. And when I checked into the hospital, they thought that I might not check out because I also had COVID pneumonia, which in a vast number of cases has been shown to be lethal. Somebody that I love dearly smuggled some Protovite in for me, and I was taking about 6 ounces a day. I went in on a Friday with the potential release of maybe never, and I was able to check out on a Sunday. That was number one. But this atrial fibrillation was really a problem. The COVID pneumonia, it took, there's something called long COVID syndrome. It's like when the lung is still affected weeks and weeks and months after you technically get over the COVID. And I was coughing off and on every now and then on some of the calls. You might have heard me cough like that to kind of clear the mucus out of the airways because the spike protein gets into the lungs and it got into the heart. And so I had to go to a cardiologist, and the cardiologist said, okay, we're going to do a stress test, and we're going to give you a stable isotope and do a CAT scan and see what's happening. So they did that, and the doc said, the results show that you have an arterial blockage, and there may be a defect in the heart. So he said, we have to schedule you for a catheterization. Now, I'm taking Protovite and Enzorb and Perform Light and Brain Award and Trimrox. I mean, I'm a devotee of the products that we formulated, and I know the science. So I'm taking all these products. I'm taking extra vitamin D and some CoQ10 and doing some non-VNI products just to make sure that my body's getting everything it needs. And I go to do the screen, and anybody who's ever done a catheterization, they punch a hole in your wrist right below your thumb in a main artery, and they send a camera up the artery to the heart. and they look at the heart and the arteries. So I'm laying there on the table, and I'm awake. They had given me a local anesthesia to put the hole in my wrist and run the camera and whatever little mechanical machinery. They had to do some roto-rootering in the artery, up the artery. And the doc said, you're not going to feel this because there's no nerves in the artery, so you may feel pressure, but you're not going to actually feel this. So I can't see him because he's covered up, and he's looking at the camera. And I'm laying on the bed there during this surgical procedure, and I had been in AFib 56% of the time for 5 days when I wore a heart monitor. And by the way, when you're stressed, the AFib is worse. And of course, I have Epstein-Barr virus and varicella, a couple of herpetic viruses that got into the heart because of COVID as well. And I know that did the damage. So I'm laying there, and I hear the doctor, as he's examining me, say the following things in this order. You don't have a blockage. Your blood is absolutely beautiful. You do not need a stent, and you should stop taking baby aspirin. We don't diagnose, treat, cure, prevent disease. But my situation, my condition, was a real head-scratcher for the entire medical staff, for the cardiologist, for the nurse practitioner, for the family doc, because I was being asked, why aren't you taking blood pressure-lowering drugs, blood thinners, anticoagulant drugs? Why aren't you on all this stuff that everybody else that has AFib is on? And I said, because my blood's good. And the heart's getting over stuff. It's just going to take a little bit of time. We just have to let the body do what the body's designed to do with time. And I just wanted to share this, that if you invest in putting, aside from your diet and some modest, I do exercise, from eating well and exercising, give your body we don't live in the Garden of Eden anymore, so give your body the additional resources that it needs to, in good nutritional supplementation, to augment, add to and improve what you get from your diet. Your body will do absolutely amazing things for you to be healthy. I am a medical head scratcher. They just do not understand why I have literally perfect blood, but yet I had AFib. And I had to send the doctors about 7 scientific papers showing that COVID, spike protein caused AFib, and the herpes virus caused AFib. And the doc said to me, when I saw him, the cardiologist said to me, he said, you showed me stuff I never knew. He said, it was absolutely incredible. So with that, I just want to encourage everybody to keep taking the products. This is not about diagnosing, curing, preventing diseases. This is about giving the body the resources that it needs to achieve its optimal genetic roles in all the different cells, tissues, organs, and systems of the body to achieve optimal health, which is the body's ability to maintain the ideal biological environment. And your body will get over almost anything that it has to deal with if it has the resources to do so. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
That's a pretty amazing story. I mean, it's kind of hard to actually imagine it. And thank you for sharing that. And I just want to mention before we turn it over to Rachel, as Bill said, we don't diagnose, treat, prevent, cure any disease. And we're not saying that our products will take care of COVID. By no means. You have to go to a doctor, you get treated. What we're saying is that anything that you're dealing with, no matter what it is, even just stress, can be helped out by getting proper nutrition. And that's our whole goal, is just to get nutrition into the body and let the body take care of itself. And by the way, if you happen to need a medication in order to eliminate a toxin or to heal something or whatever the case may be, it will work better when you're properly nutrified, if that's a word.
Yeah, that's a good one. We'll create it if not. Amen.
Okay. So remember, it's all about making sure the body has the most tools it has that you can give it to heal itself. Good night.
Good night.